Hey, it's me. Knock, knock. So, you got my money?
Think about it. You're dealing with numbers all day long. Decimal points, high frequencies, bang, bang, bang. Digits, all very acidic, above the shoulders, mustard shit. Right? Kind of wake some people out. Right? You gotta feed the geese to keep the blood flowing. I keep the rhythm below the belt.
I want to stay in Arizona. I want my new contract. Show me the money! Jerry, you better yell! Show me the money!
Where's my money? You gonna give me my money? Where's my money, man?
All right, everybody, welcome to the first episode of Cap Strapped, presented by Pan Am Football. I'm Max Dean, and today we are going to be talking about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers salary cap situation, and are they going to be able to sign all of the players that formed the core of their Super Bowl win this past year. So basically, I relayed a couple of updates on the podcast about how Pan Am Football is going to be looking in the future, and Cap Strapped is going to be a new weekly feature. So we're probably going to be doing salary cap videos basically once a week. We might do a little bit more often depending on viewer requests and how I decide to roll with all of that stuff, but for the foreseeable future, at least once per week, we will be doing salary cap. And the first true edition of Cap Strapped is Tampa Bay. Now, as always, all of my numbers come from overthecap.com and spottrack.com, so thank you to them. And let's see what else real quick. If you have requests, throw them in the comments. Hit me up on Twitter. I'm going to try and be a little bit more active there. And if you have questions, I used to say if you have questions, put them in the comments. But if you contact me on Twitter, it's probably easier for me to actually reply to you. So you can find me there. Just do Pan Am Football. So that'll be at @PanAm_football. And let's dive in. I'm also going to try and be a little bit faster than I was for the Dak Prescott episode today. So the first thing is we're going to talk about who they have under contract, who were key parts of their Super Bowl win, and who is scheduled to be a free agent that they would want to try and re-sign. So here we go. So the first thing that you're looking at here is on the left, all the players under contract for the next 2 years at the top of their cap chart. There are obviously other guys below that, but not that important. And then on the right, we have the free agents that are of note, in my opinion. I've included their previous year's salary as well. Based on the players that they still have under contract, we have offensively all 5 starting offensive linemen. So Donovan Smith, left tackle, Ali Marpet, guard, Ryan Jensen, center, Tristan Wirfs, right tackle, Alex Kappa, guard. So all 5 of those guys are still under contract. For offensive skill players, we have Mike Evans still under contract, Cameron Breit, O.J. Howard, Ronald Jones, and Keyshawn Vaughn. And then obviously Tom Brady is going to still be there as well. On the defensive side, they still have Jason Pierre-Paul, Devon White, inside linebacker, William Golston, defensive tackle, Vita Vea, defensive tackle, nose tackle, and then their secondary is pretty much all still there across the board, and they're super cheap. You've got Sean Murphy-Bunting, Carlton Davis, Jordan Whitehead, Jamel Dean, who did I miss there? Antoine Winfield Jr. So all of those guys are still there. So the main players that you're looking at moving on are Shaq Barrett, edge rusher, Ndamukong Suh, tackle, and Levante David, inside linebacker on the defensive side. And offensively, you've got Chris Godwin, Antonio Brown, Rob Gronkowski and Leonard Fournette on the offensive side. First thing I want to throw out there real quick is, of all these guys that we're looking to resign, if Leonard Fournette is going to come back for anything more than $2 million, again, I'm really not interested. I know he was productive, but you can find production at the position in other players as well. I'd look to the draft. I'd look to other guys that are already on the roster, cheap guys. I'm not interested in spending money there because we have all of these other more important players. So he's going to move on. Let's see here now. I'm going to make a couple other moves real quick. Cameron Breit is... He's not worth the money anymore. He had his worst season in terms of statistical production in all of his years since he was a rookie, which I think was back in 2014. So he had a very down year in terms of production. I know that there were other guys ahead of him, Gronkowski and Howard, but Howard got hurt pretty early in the year. So the fact that he didn't really produce much in his absence just shows me that he's not really a feature part of their offense. Aside from Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, Antonio Brown and Scotty Miller both outsnapped him, in terms of snaps over the course of the year. So we're going to move on from Cameron Breit because we save his full cap hit, and there's no dead money as a result. And we do want to bring back Gronkowski, and I just think that, he's the first casualty. Next up, we are going to be looking at William Golston, another defensive tackle. He's just one of those guys that in the strange cap year that we have this year, which will probably be significantly, lower than it was last year. These guys that are playing, defensive line for around $6 million, they're going to be cap casualties all over the league. The superstars, they will, continue to make their money. Teams won't want to give up on them just for 1 year. But those other guys that are in the, probably 5 to 8, 9 million range, they may suffer as a result of this. So we're going to let him go. Vita Vea is an excellent nose tackle. And we want to bring back Ndamukong Suh because he rushes the passer. And I should note that it does save his entire cap hit as well. There's no dead money as a result of Golston. That's why I was looking at him. In terms of other players who you would save their full cap hit if you were to release them, that would be O.J. Howard in the 5th year of his rookie contract. I don't want to do that, I don't think, because you never know if Gronkowski gets hurt. You expect O.J. Howard to be a part of the offense. You might not re-sign him next year, but I would want to keep him around for this year. Bradley Pinion, the punter, you'd save all his money too. We'll hold off on that just for now. Just because they're not in as bad of a cap situation as some other teams, so I'm just not sure that it's necessary to release him. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at the free agents that are upcoming and what we kind of expect them to be, what we expect them to command on the open market or with the Bucs. And I'll talk a little bit about both of those and why they could potentially be different. So based on their previous salaries, it's kind of all over the board. Shaq Barrett was on a franchise tag last year. Chris Godwin was on the 4th year of his rookie deal, but he was a late round pick. I want to say a 5th round pick, so he hasn't really been making a whole lot of money throughout his career. That's why it's so low. Ndamukong Suh, he came back on a 1-year deal for $8 million. Rob Gronkowski, he made $9 million after he was traded from the Patriots after coming out of retirement. So that was the last year of his contract. Levante David is on the last year of an extension with the Buccaneers, and Antonio Brown came in for basically a flyer salary of $1.6 million, or thereabouts, after his suspension ended at the end of last year. So we're going to talk about what their estimated values are going forward. And by the way, what you're looking at right here is the order in which I deem them the most important to bring back. Shaq Barrett was a huge part of the Super Bowl win. He is an excellent pass rusher. He proved that it was not just a 1-year thing. Chris Godwin is a highly productive wide receiver. I would not want to let him go. Ndamukong Suh is the third most because he does generate pass rush from the interior. And Rob Gronkowski is a big safety blanket for Tom Brady. I think him being out there helps the whole offense flow because Brady knows always where he's going to be as a very reliable connection. Levante David is an excellent linebacker, and I would like to bring him back, but we'll see if that's going to be really possible. And Antonio Brown, I'm fine to bring him back, but I don't really want to pay him very much money. I still, just one part of a season isn't enough to prove to me that he is really, super focused and reliable. I just wouldn't want to commit any money to him. And even if it's not guaranteed, whatever you designate to his contract, if you were to bring it back, you're not designated to other players when it's important, like early on in the year. And so I wouldn't want to do it if it's very much at all. So let's get through this now. Here are the top 10 edge rusher contracts from Joey Bosa all the way down to Eric Armstead. I have the average per year and when they were signed. So most of these have been in the last couple of years, last 2-3 years. The oldest one there would be Von Miller. I think he's in the last year of his contract right now, and he may be released. I've heard talk about that, but that's conversation for another day. So based on this, what I expect him to come in at, and that's Shaq Barrett. Obviously, he's the edge rusher we're talking about. So Spottrack.com has his market value estimated at 19.7. To me, that's a little bit low. I think I don't see him making less than Frank Clark. So I think that you'd be looking at him edging out Frank Clark and coming in right around where DeMarcus Lawrence is. Based on the fact that it's 2 years later, that I think he's clearly a better player than Frank Clark. And not like it's a world of difference, but I think he is a better pass rusher. I have a hard time seeing him come in underneath that. So my estimate is closer to about $21 million in terms of market value. Now, just keep in mind, I'm going to talk about the difference between what he might sign for and market value a little bit later on. So just keep that in mind as we go through. Next up, we have Chris Godwin, and he is, compared to the top 10 wide receivers here. Now, DeAndre Hopkins is a total outlier, in my opinion, from this list, and I'll do a video on him at some point because I think it's a really interesting conversation, why his is so much higher and why I don't think it really reflects the wide receiver market at all. But I'm not going to take the time and fall down that rabbit hole today. So I'm kind of looking at it more like from Julio Jones down to Robert Woods. Where do I see Chris Godwin coming in there? I would guess that he's not better than Tyreek Hill, but the contract is going to be signed 2 years later. So you have to account for that a little bit. My guess is that he's looking at coming in somewhere between Tyreek Hill and Michael Thomas. I don't think he cracks the $20 million. I don't think his market value would crack the $20 million. Again, I'm a little bit higher than Spottrack. They have his value estimated at $17.1 million. That could be because he had some injury stuff this year, but he was super productive with Jameis Winston and very productive with Tom Brady as well. I have a hard time, based on his age, I have a hard time believing that he would make much less than that, than what I'm saying. So I'm going to put his market value at about $18 million. We'll put him on par with Tyreek Hill. I'm not sure he edges him out just because he doesn't have those same kinds of, special physical traits, but I think he makes more than 17, just personally speaking. Ndamukong Suh, we're not going to do the top 10 list because he's not going to get paid like a top 10 defensive tackle. My guess is that you're probably looking at an ability to re-sign him at around $8 million again, because he had a good year, but he's another year older. He's another one of those guys where he's probably better than $8 million worth of value, but he'll be hurt a little bit by the cap going down this year. And I'm not sure necessarily which other teams would value him as much as the Buccaneers, who have just had him in system. So I'm gonna put his estimated value at about $8 million again, I think. Rob Gronkowski, he is still an effective player. He's older, though. He's definitely below the top of the line tight ends. And again, do I think that he would... I think in Tampa's system, he's probably more valuable than elsewhere in the league, just because the chemistry with Brady is so valuable to them that I just don't think that another team would have that same kind of value, because he just doesn't have the chemistry with the quarterback. I still think he could play with other teams. I just think that what I'm going to put him at here is about $8 million. I just think that it's because no other team would value him quite as much as the Buccaneers would. So $8 million, I kind of shot the wad there. But okay, so for the last two guys, Levante David is still in the realm of a top 10 linebacker in terms of compensation, most likely. So I'm going to bring up those guys here. Looking at Bobby Wagner all the way down to Corey Littleton here. Again, most of these contracts were signed in the last 2 years. Where do I think Levante David falls? It's hard to say exactly. He's better than a bunch of these guys, but he's also older than every single one of them. The closest one is Bobby Wagner, and he's still older than him as well. And we've just seen linebacker play fall off a cliff as guys get into their mid-30s. So, do I think he'll drop dramatically off this year? No, I don't. But, if as a free agent, you're probably signing a multi-year contract. So I think that hurts his value a little bit. Let's see. And I'll just throw it out there. I forgot to mention that SpotTrack put Sue's market value at 6.8. So I'm a little above them there. And then they have Gronkowski at 8.5. So again, I'm about $500,000 below them on that one. They have Levante David's market value at 12.7. I think that's a bit high in this cap-strapped year. I think he's a good player and teams would want him around the league. I'm not sure if talking about less than $1 million in difference is necessarily, based on where I fall, is that big of a deal. But I just, I think he's valued at around $12 million, but I could really see this year in particular hurting him on the open market, because as good as he is, I think he's like at this weird age where a lot of his play is based on speed as well. He was kind of one of the first really rangy linebackers to come out, and I'm just not sure how long that's going to translate based on his age at this point. So I don't see it at 12.7 regardless, and it might even be lower than what I have it at 12. But basically, I put him in at 12. He's because he's older, he's above Corey Littleton. He's better than some of these guys. He's better than Jalen Smith. He's better than Quan Alexander, at least this year. He's better than Anthony Barr. He's better than Shaq Thompson. At his best, he's better than Deion Jones. Probably, and Miles Jack. He's probably one of the best guys still on this list, but just because of the age and the position in general, I'm guessing that it wouldn't go higher than 12. And then for the last one, SpotTrack doesn't have a market value projection for him. So he made $1.6 million, but it was only based on playing part of the year, so it would probably be a little higher. Probably like $2.5-3 million or something based on when he actually came in, about halfway through the year. So what do I think his market value could be? Maybe $6 million, I would say. But that it's possible. Now I just want to say a few things real quick about all of this now that I've kind of laid it out. The New England Patriots had the New England advantage for years, which was guys would come and to play with Brady, to play, I don't know if it was to play for Belichick, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't, but to try and win a championship, they would take a little bit less, especially a lot of times a little bit later in their career, if they had already made some money, if they had been on a team that was not a consistent winner. Guys would want to come play there because they were consistent championship contenders year in and year out, and that was the closest thing that you could ever get in the NFL to any kind of guarantee, were the New England Patriots. So I don't think that Tampa is in the same boat necessarily, but I think that there's a real chance that they could benefit from that, because Brady is there, because they just came off a championship win. A lot of these guys will have felt the high, and I'm not talking about other free agents necessarily, but these guys will have felt the high of winning. They'll want to repeat. They're not going to be super eager to move on to other teams. Bruce Arians is a beloved coach by his players. He's, by all accounts, a great guy, like everything that I've heard about him. And so I think there's a real possibility that you could see some of these guys come in for a little bit less than what I have here, possibly based on that alone. Now, I think Shaq Barrett and Chris Godwin are more likely to hit the market value just because they're so good. But guys like Ndamukong Suh, Rob Gronkowski, possibly Levante David, possibly Antonio Brown might be willing to do that. Antonio Brown maybe not. I think he's got some financial trouble, so he may want to max out whatever he can get. And I will lay this out there that I would pay Shaq Barrett at $21 million. I would pay Chris Godwin at $18 million. I'd pay Sue at $8 million. I'd pay Gronkowski at $8 million. Levante David I would not pay as the Bucs at $12 million because they've got Devon White, and he's not cheap really because he is a linebacker, and because he's a linebacker, because he was I think it was a top 5 pick or something like that in 2019. So he has, in terms of rookies, he has a pretty expensive contract. It's on a sliding scale, which probably a lot of you know, but in the top 10 to 15 picks, those are relatively expensive compared to all of the rest of rookies. As you go down throughout the first round, you start getting lower and lower to like the 2-3 million mark. Second round picks, you're looking at 2 to a little less, and then from the third round on, you're talking about under $1 million a year for a lot of these guys. So for Devon White, I think he's around $8 million. I should have double checked, but I think he's around $8-something million. That's pretty high for a rookie. He's got a couple of years left. You're probably gonna extend him after 2022, so there doesn't necessarily need to be crossover, but because also Devon White has been so good, Levante David I would love to have back, but I just think at $12 million, I wouldn't do it. I would really try and get him to buy in and come back for a little bit less. Antonio Brown, I wouldn't even do for $6 million. Frankly, I would, if I were the Bucs, if I were any team, I wouldn't even go down that road for $6 million. It seems like you would really need a steadying presence like Tom Brady to make that work. There are other quarterbacks that are like that. But again, it's just at that point, why bother? So if I'm the Bucs, I would love to have him back. He's a good player, but I would be hoping to get him for $2.5 million a minute, or maybe $3 million. But if I could get him back for $2.5 million, I would do it. That's probably kind of unrealistic though. Now based on all of those costs, we're probably going to need to rework some contracts here. I don't know if you saw before, I'm moving a little faster, so I didn't mention, but he had the Bucs had a available cap space of around, I think, $40 million. Around $40 million when I made those 2 cuts of William Golston and Cameron Breit. So $40 million, it's not going to cover the top end guys plus the other ones, right? We need to make a little bit more space. So I'm looking at Tom Brady's contract right here, and there's an important thing to point out. And those of you who are Tampa fans probably know this or probably heard about it, but Tampa Bay does not like to do signing bonuses. So they usually pay you per year. How do I put this? Their cap hit is usually what you get paid. So if you have a signing bonus, it prorates over the duration of the contract for up to 5 years, meaning that what you're paid may affect the future, at least to some degree, versus all right now. So with the Buccaneers, they pay everything in base salary, roster bonuses, and so whatever you're paid that year only affects that year. And so that's true to some degree. It's not that they never do it. They just don't really like to do it. I'm not sure if it's better or worse. I think that there's something to be said for using proration. I think a lot of teams, overdo it when they get themselves into a tricky situation, but I don't think that completely avoiding it is necessarily the right move either. And I bring that up because based on what the Buccaneers are really looking at right now, it's going to be pretty much impossible for them to re-sign the guys that they were just talking about bringing back. I think Arians said it. I don't have the quote in front of me, but he basically said we're looking to bring back our core guys. And they have a bunch of them available in free agency. So we're going to have to do a little bit with proration to get enough space without losing the core guys, like other core guys, right? You don't want to just rob Peter to pay Paul in terms of the roster itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at Brady's contract, because they also, Jason Light recently said something along the lines of, extending Tom Brady is a possibility. So to me, having Tom Brady play in 2022 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is an entirely realistic option, even if you don't extend him. Now, obviously, Brady wants guarantees, sure. But at this point in his career, I'm not sure how concerned he is with that. He's got all the money in the world. I mean, between the money he's made, between Giselle, between he will continue to have marketing campaign money and stuff like that for the rest of his life. I don't think he really cares that much about money in terms of like, oh, I have to be guaranteed for next year. So if they want to play with him next year, I say theoretically you could just have him play out this contract and sign him next year, right? There's no real reason that wouldn't be a big deal. With other quarterbacks, you'd be concerned, but I mean, with Brady being into his mid-40s at that point, I don't think he wants to go to a third situation. I think he'd be really happy here. So if Brady is interested in an extension, it means he likes it here. That would mean he probably isn't going anywhere, even if he's not extended. And so what it really tells me is that this is one of the situations that they're going to look at using some proration to free up some cap space, because otherwise, why bother? That's just the way that I read the situation. Again, the Buccaneers do not universally avoid proration. They just generally don't like it. They've done it with Mike Evans before. They've done it with one or two other players periodically. And they also just don't like to do large sums of proration either. So when they do it few and far between, and they do it with smaller amounts too. So Brady's base salary is $15 million. His roster bonus is $10 million. Those two would have made up the entirety of his cap hit this year in 2021. However, he did achieve incentives in 2020, primarily in the playoffs and winning the Super Bowl. That's what most of that is from, but he also had a little bit from something else as well. So his total cap hit is $28.375 million. It's all guaranteed because it was guaranteed, plus you can't get out of the incentive. So it's all guaranteed. So what I would do is do a 2-year extension on top of this. I would not touch the roster bonus. I would do only the base salary. Okay, and I would... Okay, so let me just bring it up here. The base salary itself is been lowered from 15 to the veteran minimum for a player of Brady's tenure, which is 1.075 million, and the remaining of that would be prorated over the 3 years, the 2021 year that was already there, plus the 2 new extension years. And so it doesn't dramatically lower his cap hit. It goes from a little over 28 to just over 19. So you're looking at freeing up at about 9 million. What I would do is, if you're doing this, you're pretty much guaranteeing it anyway. So I would guarantee the 2022 portion of his contract, and probably not the 2023. I think he would be okay with that as well. I just in case things go off the rails in one of the next 2 years, you don't want to necessarily be committed to that. You don't ever want to be in a position where Brady doesn't want to retire, but you don't want to keep him on the team. I feel like he'd be amenable to it. So basically the way it works is it looks like a lot of dead money potentially in 2021, but you're never going to cut him then anyway. And doing this, you would basically be guaranteeing that you're not cutting him in 2022 either. And then in 2023, you have an easy out if at that point it's time to retire, or you want to release him. At that point, you have just under $5 million in dead money at that point. And I think this would be very reasonable for the Bucs to do. It's only about $14 million in prorated money, and only about 9.25 of that, or something approximately, it is actually on any future year. So it just, to me, that makes a lot of sense in terms of you're freeing up some more space. You're not going crazy with it. You're doing it with a player who you know you're committing to for at least 2 years. And you might end up with no dead money, because if he plays for the next 3, gravy. I mean, I would say I find it hard to believe that would happen, but with Brady at this point, anything is kind of possible. So you would free up a total of 9.283 million there on the cap. So at this point, you're looking at just under 50 million in available space, and I think that's enough to get done what you need to get done here. And you're gonna have to use one of 2 options for these players. All right, this is Max from the future just popping in, and the reason I'm here is because I realized that as I went through this last little section here, I didn't really talk about the franchise tag or its possible use for Chris Godwin or Shaq Barrett. And the reason for that is pretty simple. It's because I just don't think it's that important, really. They may use it, but the overall effect that it has on what I lay out here in just a sec is not that great or that grand, and I'll explain why real quick. So for Shaq Barrett, his projected franchise tag for 2021 would be $18,993,600, according to Joel Corey from Inside the Cap, and that would be, of course, if they use the tag on him. And he played under the tag in 2020, so that's a 20% raise over his 2020 franchise tag cap hit. You're guaranteed at least a 20% raise if you get hit a second time, and that's only about $2 million less than the annual per year that I projected for him anyway. So it's possible that they would use it. It just doesn't really help the amount per year, which I'm about to lay out in 2021, and more so, it just guarantees that you have a longer time to be in contract negotiations with him. And for Chris Godwin, the projected franchise tag number for wide receiver this year would be $15,326,000, which is about 2.7 approximately lower than my projected annual value for a contract for him. So again, either one would be a little bit lower first year, but it really is not going to make a difference in the scheme of things, and you'll see why I'm saying that in just a second. But I know that if I don't mention it, that a lot of people will ask about it, and again, the only difference that it truly makes, in my opinion, is if you used it on either one of these guys, it just gives you a little bit longer of an opportunity to negotiate a new contract with one of them. So aside from that, everything else I'm about to say remains valid kind of despite this. So I'll see you guys soon. Thanks for watching. If you want to do the majority of them. Again, it is possible that some of these guys may sign for less than this because of the Brady effect, or now the Tampa effect, or whatever you want to call it. Guys searching for a championship. Rob Gronkowski might very much be in that vein. Sue might be very much in that vein. Levante David, I could see being there. I think Barrett and Godwin would cash in, especially Godwin, who has made only a few $1,000,000, like a very, 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 very small amount compared to, other players at his position. I mean, if you're a first-round rookie, you made more as a wide receiver in your first year than he made in his whole 4-year career so far. So I think he would be really interested in cashing in. Now, you say, I'm looking at this, that's still over $50 million, right? So, 21 plus 18 plus 8 plus 8, you're already going over $50 million right there. So how do you get all those guys under contract for this year? Well, you have two options. The first one is to use, which one did I do first? So the first one is to, if you want to avoid, okay, so I made a slight mistake. So when you're looking at this, where it says roster bonus, it's supposed to say prorated bonus. I was just working a little bit fast. So real quick, if you want, you can say subtract a certain amount. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. Sorry, everybody. This is a hypothetical contract for Shaq Barrett going forward. Don't look too much at the exact numbers, because what I'm about to show you is more about a strategy versus specific numbers. So what I've done is, if we're averaging $21 million per year for this contract, I've subtracted $6 million from the first year and to create more space in 2021. And I've used a signing bonus to prorate it throughout the rest of the contract. So instead of a $21 million cap hit, you have a $16.2 million cap hit. I know it's a little confusing. Where it says roster bonus is supposed to say signing prorated bonus. Now, what that's done is it hasn't done a huge chunk. It's a smaller amount of proration, but it still frees up a little bit of space. So if you would be willing to do that with Barrett and, say, Godwin, you'd be able to work everybody in fairly comfortably. There is another way that you can do this if you don't want to mess with proration up front, and that is to basically just literally push money to the future instead of the funky way that proration does it. You just pay him a $15 million base salary in 2021, and then you pay him an extra $6 million in 2022. And normally, players want the signing bonus versus accepting this because they still get their money year one, and it just affects the cap later. If you are the Buccaneers and you don't want to prorate, this is a way that you can do it. What you would have to do, obviously, is just guarantee it. So you'd have to convince Barrett that you're getting this money no matter what. We're fully guaranteeing it to you at signing. What we're looking to do is just basically defer that payment until 2022 to help field a more championship level roster this year. If you can talk him into that, that's fine. I don't see why he wouldn't. If it's fully guaranteed, you're probably going to be okay with that. And this same theory goes for any of the other players. So to kind of sum up everything, the way that you could get this done, in my opinion, is you're probably going to extend Brady, bring the cap hit down a little bit. You're gonna cut a couple of the superfluous players like Breit and William Golston, who don't leave any dead money and are just not the most important players at their own position on your team. You're going to hope that you can Brady affect some of these guys to get them for a little bit lower than what their likely market value is. And then finally, you're going to have to either use a little bit of proration for some of these contracts, or you're going to have to guarantee, pay a little less now and guarantee a little bit more in the future. And so hopefully that wasn't too long, but that's how I would approach the Tampa Bay Buccaneers salary cap situation. And again, if you have questions, hit me up on Twitter, @PanAm_football. And if you have requests, you can request on Twitter. You can request in the comments below. And yeah, again, the feedback has been awesome, guys. So I'm not sure exactly what day this will come out, but yeah, it is going to be the first ever edition of Cap Strap, which is a new segment, a new weekly feature of Pan Am Football. So, guys, thank you so much, and have an awesome night, morning, whatever it is for you. For me, it's about 5 a.m. right now. So, have a good one.